have to talk about Pearl Harbor. That was on December 6th, wasn't it? Or was that on December 7th?
7th, wasn't it? I believe it was the 7th, if my memory serves.
Yeah.
But again, yeah.
That
I would
was
have
the
remembered
act.
closer
That
to
was
the
the act.
day.
That was the act, the hostile act by the Japanese that saved the rest of the world, because if the United States didn't get into it, that war would have lasted much longer and been terrible.
Well, and also likely Britain would have lost.
It was terrible. Yeah, Britain would have probably lost, although the United States was keeping them alive, just like they're keeping Ukraine alive right now. There's no way Ukraine or Israel could fight the wars they did if they weren't supplied by the United States. It's kind of a lend-lease program.
Yeah,
Britain got a lend-lease program, so it was in the interest of the United States to keep Britain, make sure that they weren't invaded, but they didn't want to get involved in the war for good reasons, for the good reasons at the wrong time, though. They didn't realize if they didn't get involved in the war, it was going to come to them anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm trusting,
as it did at Pearl Harbor.
I'm trusting that as Betty's there, she would have told us if there was any glitches in sound. Just to let everybody know, what I did yesterday is after the end of the show, we published this on my Facebook, on the Talking Niagara Facebook, new Talking Niagara page, and on YouTube. So there was no sound on any of those channels on the broadcast that was done yesterday. Now, I checked that directly after we closed down, and I did a retest broadcast on my channel. No problem with the sound, right? I did a retest broadcast on YouTube. No problem with the sound. I did a retest broadcast on Talking Niagara page. There was no sound, right? But when I tested again 5 minutes later, there was sound. Right?
I don't know.
So, weird. Okay, so we were talking about Britain and the support, and you and them talking about weapons support for Israel. Of course, with what happened in Syria. Sorry?
And Ukraine.
Yeah, with what happened in Syria, of course, with the collapse of the Syrian regime, the Israeli military began seizing control of the demilitarized buffer zone in Syria that was created as part of the 1974 ceasefire between the countries. And the incursion has sparked condemnation, with critics of Israel critics accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire and possibly exploiting the chaos in Syria for a land grab. Basically, they're moving to control the 400 square kilometer, 155 square mile demilitarized buffer zone in Syrian territory, and the buffer zone between Syria and Israel-controlled Golan Heights, with the UN. That was controlled with the UN after the 1973 Mideast War, and basically this is to take the buffer zone away. The buffer zone on the Syrian side.
Well, this is
Netanyahu's claiming it's a defensive position.
We'll see about that. There is this desire for a greater Israel, and we keep telling people that, and it seems it never comes up among politicians. Very few. The odd British one, the odd very, very brave American one will point out that Zionism wants a much bigger Israel. That includes the West Bank, and it includes pieces of Lebanon and Syria, plus the Golan Heights, or the Golan Heights is part of Syria. Now, you are not going to get Israel to move out of there. They're going to move in. The Golan Heights was captured territory from Syria, and they just recently ceded that territory from, not ceded it, but took it and
Yeah.
said it's theirs now. They're not going to ever give it back to Syria. So they're definitely looking for a little bit of a land grab. It might be a little bit more politically impossible for them to take a piece of Lebanon right now, but they are so much more. They're so much more better, I would say, in military than everybody they're fighting right now. They are being supplied with insanely good intelligence and weaponry from the United States, and most of their opposition is weak or fractious. So now is their time to take some territory. So they're taking advantage of this situation to eat up parts of the West Bank. They're going to eat up parts of Gaza. I don't care what the United States says. They always say, oh, well, we want them out. We want the people back in Gaza, Palestinians, when this is all over. That's not going to happen. The United States always backs down. And they always say something they don't really mean. They say, oh, well, we want a two-state solution. Well, they never work for it. They never work for a two-state solution. They only do just keep supplying Israel with the means of taking the West Bank or taking Gaza or taking Golan Heights.
Well, Netanyahu said that Assad's fall is a direct result of heavy blows that were and as the direct results of blows landed on Hamas and Hezbollah and on Iran. And he added that Israel would occupy the summit of Mount Hermon, which is within the buffer zone on the Syrian-Libyan border and is the highest peak on the eastern Mediterranean province. And basically, that's what he's declared as his intent right now. We don't know
the high ground and keep it. That's typically pretty much ordinary, everyday military strategy. Take the high ground and keep it. That's why they took the Golan Heights. And that's why they're not going to give it back. Yeah. This is a bit of a land grab.
And that's why they take the mountain. They take that mountain because it gives them control over that part of Syria to ensure there's nothing coming in. Because that gives them would then give them a reasonable buffer zone in Western Syria. And I suspect they'll be taking a little bit more than that. They'll basically be expanding the existing buffer zone all the way across, I would think.
Yeah, this is an opportunity that Israel has already had military presence up there and doing, and it just had a ceasefire with Lebanon. So now it can release its troops into Syria and take advantage of the disorganization that's happened there. Now that the rebel insurgency is taking over, that still makes Syria a very fractious place. There's ISIS is working out. The Kurds are holding the territory in the east. Their traditional
in the east, largely to the northeast, is Kurdish controlled. To the north is a combination of Kurdish control or Turkish control. Down the center strip, there's actually where the main cities are, is of course where the rebels now are in control. And the rebel leader was making statements the other day about needing, making this and looking towards bringing elections. Not sure how much of that I believe.
Well, he has turned his back a bit on the harshest part of the Islamic traditions where he came from. He was part of Al Qaeda. He was part of Al Nusra Front. He has decided he's going to go a different route. He's not going to be the draconian Islamic leader. He's going the other way. He's going the way the old caliphate was, where the old caliphate, like when ISIS and all these other groups want to turn the world back to the old Islamic days, and they have these very, very harsh punishments and harsh rules, they forget that the Caliphate was one of the most tolerant empires ever. They were one of the most tolerant empires later. They were much more tolerant than the Christian world at that time. They permitted Jews and Christians of all sorts to have their religion, and for the day that it was remarkable. So I'm thinking that their leader, Giuliani, thinks maybe much like that. He is thinking, well, the old caliphate was not like the Islamists say it was. The old caliphate was a huge place that ruled many diverse people and many diverse religions, and it did it with, for the day, remarkable tolerance. So I'm thinking he's thinking along those lines. I hope that that's what he is. But in the meantime, this is an opportunity for Israel to take advantage of the weakness and disorganization in Syria and do a land grab. Now, you can and they can argue that they're not doing a land grab because they can justly say they're putting up a buffer zone between them and the Syrians. And yeah, sure, I think just about any military would do that in the situation they are, but I don't think they have much intentions of staying there. And no Syrian army can face the Israelis right now because they have nowhere near. Now, what the Israelis have done and the Americans have done, the Israelis went off and they blasted the heck out of as many munition spots as they could to make sure that I'm thinking that the rebels weren't all that strong. But what the United States did when their huge bombing of a few days ago, they took out as many ISIS places as they could. That, in effect, helped the Kurds and it helped the new rebels.
Yeah. I was going to say that, because because that basically means that those areas with all the arms bases, it helps pretty well, anybody who's anti-government, further their cause.
Now, what the Israelis might not particularly like about what's happening now is they have much stronger military. They have incredibly much more sophisticated intelligence. I mean, they can find out everywhere where there's a military dump, where military hardware is. But what I think they're probably a little bit nervous of is Giuliani, because he is an extremely good leader. He stayed up in Idlib in the northwest part of the country, and he just didn't get a whole bunch of diverse military groups and militias together under one umbrella. He actually governed Idlib, learned the governance. So that is the biggest thing. You can take out a place militarily, but if you can't govern it, then it won't work. Look what happened in the United States and Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right. Look what happened to them. They couldn't govern it, and sooner or later they had to leave, and everything went back.
So by learning in Idlib, they're basically more prepared for takeover in the rest of that central zone. But of course, again, the rebels only control a central zone within Syria. What has happened is large parts of the country are no longer in government control, but are no longer in anybody's control.
Yeah, that's so they're still pretty much it'll take a long time before Syria is able to settle down. Ironically, as I said before, the United States and Israel and their proxies in the Middle East like disorganization and separation. That's what they like. Yeah. They like destabilized areas. Once it's destabilized, each one of the different factions are fighting one another. They never do unite. And I would think the Israelis would probably like to do a nice little assassination on Giuliani because he poses a threat, a unifying threat What they don't want is unification there. As long as they're fighting each other, they don't have what it takes to take on Israel. So,
Yeah. Well, I can see basically Israel strengthening its buffer zone across that whole area, taking the, taking. I understand that taking that high ground is important to Israel. Um, yeah, and oh yeah, and by the way, we've also got okay. Israel going to take land? That's almost certainly, yeah, absolutely. And is will Turkey go for a land grab as well? And I think the answer to that one is also yes, because the worrying factor that has been put out by Turkish forces over the last year is that section along the northwest edge of Syria, in the far east of Turkey, has actually been an area that the Turks have been very concerned about, because of Syrian incursions across the border. They're less concerned about the Kurdish forces, because in fact that area there also has Kurds in Turkey.
well, look, the Kurds in the eastern part of Syria are the biggest threat to Turkey. And this is very ironic because, troublesome, because the 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 Kurds there are united with the Americans in fighting ISIS. And in fact, the Kurds are essential in the fight against ISIS. They were the ones that held things together. The United States helped them out. However, they're arch enemies with the Turks. And many Kurds live within the Turkish border on the southeastern part of Turkey.
Yeah.
And of course, the PPK, which is the Turkish terrorist group, that they're always in the back of the mind of Erdogan. So he would like to really, there's a real hate thing going on between Kurdish and Turkish leaders. What the United States and nobody else wants the Kurds to have is a homeland. They are a people with a homeland, right?
But the Kurds and Turks have not been at war with each other. They might not be they might not be in agreement, but they're not at war with one another.
They have, though. The problem is that the Turks have made incursions into the Kurdish areas there to fight and destabilize the Kurds. The Turks see the Kurds as the biggest threat to them, and when they invaded and started to beat up on the Kurds, because they've got a really good army, much better equipped than the Kurds. When they did that, if you remember, when Trump was in office, he turned his back on the Kurds and he freaked out his own military guys on the ground. Do not do that. He turned his back on the Kurds and he let the Turks do what they wanted. And that was a big, big mistake, because the Kurds are a very valuable ally there.
Well, the issue about the Kurds is the Kurds exist in at least 3 different countries. They do not have, in fact, I think it's 4: Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, but they do not have their own state. And that's one of the things that probably coming out of this whole Middle Eastern conflict at a certain point will be a new Kurdish state.
No, that would be fought viciously by
Erdogan
and the Turks. They do not want the Kurds to have a state, nor do the Iraqis, nor do the Iranians. Nobody wants them to have a state.
Of course
they don't. Not even the Americans, although they use them as allies, want them to have a state.
Of course they won't. Of course they don't want them to have a state. But it's a constant issue within that area.
Yes, and the Kurds have been a stateless people for all time.
Yes,
they are an ethnic group that has been there. Now, the difference between the Kurds and everybody else around them is they're not Arabs. They're Kurdish people. They are an ethnically different people.
Yes.
Their old religion used to be the Yazidi religion, as if you remember. So they are an ethnically different people with different customs, but they are by and large Sunni Muslims. So it seems so funny when you have Sunni militias fighting Kurdish militias. The whole religious thing gets lost here when you start thinking about that. You also have the Shia minority Arabs in Iraq. They probably don't care about the Kurdish state because they're mostly in the south of the country. But it does get complicated because the Turks and the Iranians would be very, very ambivalent. Well, the Iranians would be ambivalent, but the Turks do not want a strong unified Kurdish force because part of the Kurdish homeland is southeast Turkey.
Yep. All right. Yep, exactly. And that's what I said. Kurds would like their own homeland. I'm not saying that those other nations would like to give it to them.
No, they've been a stateless people for almost all their whole existence.
Yeah.
And they never have been able to get statehood, but nobody wants them to have it. But I don't know why that is. But they have actually now living in a semi-autonomous, well, a very autonomous zone of Iraq. Iraq is a very big country.
And that's probably what they'd be looking for in Syria. A semi-autonomous zone in Syria.
Yeah, they would see their homeland is northern Iraq and Syria and southern Turkey. So eastern Syria, northern Iraq, eastern Syria, and southeastern Turkey. So they have this autonomous zone, but the Turks are the biggest army in the area, the biggest, most powerful army in the area, and they have issues with the Kurds. The Kurds have been trying to get a homeland for a very long time, and they had this terrorist network called the PPK, the Kurdish Workers' Party. It's called. It's like a throwback to the communist days when they were supplied by Russia. Unfortunately, that bad blood between the Turks and the Kurds still occurs, and it would be very nice if they just buried the hatchet and allowed the Kurds to have their homeland. Now, we don't expect Turkey to give up part of their country for the Kurds, but they could actually give them some autonomy. And it would be very nice if northern Iraq, eastern parts of eastern Syria become an autonomous homeland for the Kurds. They've suffered incredibly. They suffered big time under Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
The Kurds are the ones that were gas tacked by Saddam Hussein. And they were also the ones after the first Gulf War were the ones that were pushed right out of northern Iraq by Saddam Hussein, who was embittered by the fact that he lost the first Gulf War. And he took it out on the Kurds.
Yeah.
So the Kurds have had a long history of suffering.
How many Kurds are there? Don't know, but there's quite a large section of them. I don't know. They're not a small nation, that's for sure.
No, and they've been there for a very long time. I think Saladin used them as mercenaries or something like that. The Turks would use them in their pogroms against Christians, against Armenians. The Kurds were hired to beat up on Armenians by the Turks. And they were in the pogroms that happened before the Armenian genocide, the Armenian Holocaust in 1915, 1916. They've had a presence, a bad guy, good guy presence, basically. And of course, they are the ones whose old religion was the very interesting Yazidi religion that still exists there.
Yeah. All right.
But they're mostly Sunni Muslims.
Yeah, I think it's time to move on anyway, Dave. Okay. Councillor Carlos Garcia, who represented Ward 6 in Port Dalhousie, died. on St. Catharines as city councillor died, and he was a former private. He used to run a strategic planning firm in the private sector before he became city councillor, and was serving his third time as St. Catharines city councillor, and previously had served as a regional councillor for St. Catharines.
Hey, can I just interject here for a minute?
Yep.
I've just got these stats for Mike. So there's about 30 to 45 million people that are Kurdish. So that's a very general number. So you can tell.
I think it might be larger.
As of late. So Turkey has 18 to 25% of the population. Iraq has 15 to 20% of the population. Iran has 10% of the population, and Syria has 9% of the population. So you see, Turkey is very nervous there. They have 25% of all Kurds within their country.
Yeah.
And that is a threat to them.
Yeah.
Or so they see it.
Yeah. All right. Back to Councillor Garcia. So he was champion for Port Dalhousie seniors and a fierce advocate for free parking at city beaches. Yeah, good. Excellent. All right. And and basically Matt Sisko has also said that Garcia will be sorely missed.
Oh, okay. So it's just an announcement of his death then, eh?
Yep, it was an announcement of his death. I was just really looking at that, wanting to announce it, in case anybody didn't already know. Okay. Moving.
Yes,
moving
I'd
on.
like to. I like to, and like maybe tomorrow I'll get into a little bit more. But if you go to the city agenda, and last night, if you saw a city, there is that thing I was talking about before about how you can get your residences. Anyway, we'll talk about grave error first, and I'll get the information and maybe just talk about it in the end.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So the issue, the book Grave Error, How the Media Misled Us and the Truth About Residential Schools, has actually been refused by the Greater Victoria Public Library. That means the public libraries that are on the in Victoria on the island in British Columbia.
Yes. And this is standing out because the other libraries around are permitting it. And this is at first when I read this, I was shocked because I only saw Victoria Library, and I'm thinking of our own one on Victoria.
Our own Victoria Library.
Yeah, I thought I had talked to the librarians there, and they told me, I says, do you still have Mein Kampf in the library? And then they were quiet for a second, and they said, there are thousands of things in here that can offend you. We believe in intellectual freedom. So I was very pleased to hear that. So when I saw this, and I didn't like it, had to take a double take. It wasn't our Victoria Library.
No, yeah.
But this unfortunately is a trend that's been happening in the so-called woke universe we have right now. And I dislike to use the word woke to describe anyone, but in this particular case, it's applicable. In this library, they've had 14 requests for grave error, and they don't want to buy it. They don't want. They are in effect censoring the public. They have decided for the public that this is not a good book. Now, this isn't one full of profanity. It's not one full of rages of hate. This is a book of supposed science and journalistic wherewithal. That's a pretty boring book, all in all. That digs in. Yeah, it is like from what I've read about it, it's just a book of statistics and things like that. So it can be very dry.
And it starts on the premise that to date, no human remains have been unearthed at any of the supposed mass unmarked graves. And additionally, and this is where I'm going to mess it up, the Tkemloops Wupemk First Nation now uses the term anomalies to describe the lands rather than graves to describe the discovery of this disturbed land within the Kamloops residential school site.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just read right off. The book published by True North and Dorchester Books challenges the misleading, just like you said, narrative push legacy media and the politicians. But to date, no human remains have been found, just like you said. And so, for some reason, the Victoria Library says no. They've had 14 requests, massive amounts of email, and they are snubbing the public. I find this very discouraging because it is, we know what's best for you, so we're
Yeah.
going to censor you. We're going to
Yeah.
censor this. Curiously, this is another point, and this is going to rile a few people. They've said they've done studies and seen when agencies, when academia is now much more full with women, and when areas are more controlled by women, they seem to be more censorial, believe it or not. But anyway, we can get that back into that area later, because I expect that the library staff was mostly women. The policy explicitly aims to present all many points of view. See, from the outset, the Greater Victorian Public Library was accused of hypocrisy for banning the book. Its policy explicitly aims to present as many points of view as possible and to resist calls for censorship. Well, that's what they're doing now, isn't it?
Yeah. By the way, just to interrupt that, apparently Mike Cushman is saying the other Wayne is in hospital.
Yes. Yeah.
Wayne Campbell.
I saw Karen Fraser, who we have to thank for this article we're talking about right now. I saw Karen Fraser yesterday when I was standing beside the Salvation Army kettles, and she told me that same thing, that Wayne's in pretty rough shape.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I haven't seen that in the news, but yeah, that's a sad thing to hear. It's sad. Yeah. Very sad. Because I know he's given a lot, despite any differences we may have had, he's given a lot to this city. Right. So yeah, I thank Wayne, and I do hope he recovers.
Well, yes. Well, I don't know. He's in pretty rough shape.
I fear the worst at this stage.
Yeah, and I think probably, among other things, we can expect Vince Cario to go back onto the council now.
Yeah,
because even if Wayne does beat this, he'll probably be too weak to be able to serve as.
Well, actually, that's a good question about Vince Cario going back onto the council. Before the last council, one of the reasons why Vince Cario was almost the last person to actually file papers is because he stated at the prior council meeting that that he was actually thinking about retiring from city council, and in fact, actually, when he decided to actually try again, that was intended to be his last term on the city. So he may not accept the nomination.
Well, he may not. I hope he doesn't. I hope he sticks with it, because he's done his thing, and also, and this is no slur against Vince Cario at all. He bought his seat on council because he had the resources to really throw out a lot of money. I think he spent the most, or one of the most. I think at one of those elections anyway, he spent the most of anyone because he can afford it. Yeah. When you have that kind of economic wherewithal, and when you look at the amount of votes he got for how much he spent, you could see that, like, it wasn't proportional like anyone else. Somebody else spent $100 and got one vote, and he spent $500 and got one vote. It's not proportional. So unfortunately, this is it's become a council that you have to have money in, and that's another problem with the at-large system. You would have to have a lot less money if you had a ward system. But in any case, if Vince comes back, we just have to welcome it. I don't think the ladies in town would be too happy about this, because this is a return of the old boys club, as they have said in the past. Different activists in our town.
Right. Okay, so going back to where we were on the grave error story. So Peter was saying author Frances Widowson made some powerful enemies when she produced this book. There's big profit influence at stake. And Chris Simone is asking, where are the bodies? Essentially, that's a very good question, because no bodies have been found, and this is part and parcel of the issue that we went. Unfortunately, the government went gung ho into this question about there being bodies, or certain people went gung ho into it. Back, what was this? 2020?
Yeah, it bothers me. Yeah, it bothers me the government would automatically assume guilt of the magnitude that they that the indigenous people have claimed. What you have is something that happened to the indigenous people that was bad. It didn't work. It was good intention to try to modernize the people. However, the real story behind it is not what is said. And they keep looking for bodies. Well, they have 231 anomalies, and they have 22 suspected.
But again, I look at these. I look at these treasure hunting programs and how often they utilize the same technology. They go across the ground and they find anomalies. So they're looking for Roman ruins or something, and they know there's a Roman ruins that was built in a particular area, and they do GPR across the thing, ground penetrating radar, and find that there is anomalies in a particular area. So they dig a trench across one of these areas where there's an anomaly, and all they find is that, in fact, the anomaly in that field was nothing more than deep digging, somebody digging a hole maybe 100 years ago. They find some Second World War coins or something like that. Well, and then he realizes, it was the point of an air raid bunker in the Second World War that got plowed up after the war.
Well, yeah, there's all kinds of things we could talk about. In fact, we've got another article here about them trying to use cadaver dogs instead of ground penetrating radar, because the ground penetrating radar hasn't really turned up much, or at least not a body yet. And there is, but the main thrust of this particular article is the censorship that the library has imposed.
Yeah,
it's explicit. It's explicit policy to give as many viewpoints as possible, but it has refused to listen to its own patrons, 14 of which have asked for the book to be purchased, and many emails have wanted that book there. It is up to us to decide if that book is worthy or not worthy. And it's important that we have that opinion. But when you have a librarian deciding this is not good, we don't want you to know this, that in effect is censorship. Usually when you think of censorship, you think of dictators like Stalin or Hitler or something like that, who banned books and that kind of thing. This is a much more subtle and it's much worse kind of censorship, because they are deciding, they're the ones that control the source of information in their library, and they're deciding what you can and cannot read. So this is unfortunately, this is I don't know much about the woke agenda, but that's part of it. Is they're just as bad as anyone else with their censorship, their ideology.
All right. And like everywhere where we see this whole question about wanting to stop publication of something. It always rails me.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, right now I feel like going out and buying this book. It's probably not a book I would buy anyway. And as you say, it's a scientific book, not anything else. But I just feel like going out and buying it because of because if it's banned, it's got to be worth buying.
Well, it's only banned in that library, or maybe a couple other places, but I would like to see if it's in our library.
Yeah.
If it's in our library, I'd be very much more comfortable. Because like I said, I talked to the libraries and they were in favor of intellectual freedom. So that's good.
Go have a check, have a look. See whether and in fact, you don't have to go into the library. You can go onto the library website and have a look.
Yeah. But they may have not purchased it yet, but it'll be interesting. I bet you they're getting a bunch of calls as soon as that article comes. Yeah. Do you have that book? I don't want to read it. I heard it's boring, so I can imagine some people saying, but I want to know. Make sure you have it there.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Ruth Ann Neuwesteg is calling for a redesign of parking at the Exchange. Was that on the agenda last night?
Probably was. There was a notice for that. I didn't see it really. I didn't see it, but she on the agenda. But to be quite honest, I didn't scan the agenda with too close of a glass. This is a notice of a motion, and I don't know if they brought it up last night or not. We'll see. But anyway, we can discuss what she wants.
And essentially, she's advocating for a redesign of the parking lot of the Arts and Cultural Hub and Museum to maximize the number of spaces available. The initiative aims for better accommodate visitors and enhance the overall experience of the cultural centre. I wonder actually if they would also be worthwhile putting a parking lot further down Pill Street on the open land that exists there.
Yes, basically, anyone that's gone to the Exchange sees that their parking is an issue.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't yet heard anyone talk about parking lot 13. Parking lot 13 is nearly right at the corner. It's very close to the corner of Main and Ferry. It's on the north side of that, northeast side. You can hardly see it because it's behind the old liquor store that used to be there. But there's a parking lot there, a pretty substantial one, and it's not that far from the Exchange. But that aside, parking is an issue, of course. People in and around the area are bumming out that people are parking in their parking spots. And Neuwesteg has a bit of skin in the game here because she owns Patterson.
Because her business is there, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because she owns Patterson Funeral Homes and people are parking in her parking lot. Yeah.
Of course, and especially since when you look at it on a funeral home, on any given day, a funeral home may well have 3 cars in it, right? The car park, but they have a massive car park there because, of course, when a funeral occurs, they've got suddenly 50 cars descending upon them, and the need for a massive amount of parking space. It's natural. It's a natural part of when there's a funeral or a celebration of life type service at a place like that. So you don't want people randomly parking in your place.
Especially if my funeral is there at Patterson, the parking lot's going to be overflowing. There's going to be thousands and thousands of people come there, all saying the same thing. Wheeler said he'd put me in the mill if I bought him a beer.
So basically, Karen is saying, is it due to parking that the market has gone back to McBain? And I think largely it is.
Exactly right. Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
exactly right. Because you go to the market, even if you're going there for 10, 15, 20 minutes or something like that, you want to be able to just pull in, park, and go.
The vendors and the patrons have all asked to go back to McBain Center, and it
Yeah.
seemed to me silly to move it from McBain Center. The first time I went, I wondered how would the exchange. I drive by the exchange. I said, how would they be able to make a farmers market here that would rival the one on McBain? And actually, they didn't. The vendors don't like it. The patrons don't like it. It seemed, and in retrospect, you wonder why they moved it back there in the first place. I don't know. Everybody kind of said the same thing. Do they have enough parking? What's that? Oh, 88, 881 Slick. They would be saying, make wheels great again.
This is Gary Wilkins, of course.
Yes. The green bastard of parts unknown. The Riverman. The Riverman. Yes. I'm gonna have to interview Gary and see
Are
his
you?
life story. No, I
Yeah.
want to. I want to.
All right. Yeah. So basically, I know I kind of knew this, and I get where Neusteg is coming from. Because that has always been a problem for all of the funeral homes down there, right? Which is that people come, they park there and walk away. Nothing to do with the funeral home. It's been the same with the other funeral home. It's true with her funeral home. It's an issue, right? So I'm not surprised that she's concerned about this. And I think that I agree with her. We need to better accommodate visitors to improve the overall experience of the cultural centre. And the best way to do that would be, as you say, either publicize the existing parking that is available, or create parking further down Peel Street.
Well, the problem too is we have an aging population, so getting more and better parking that's
Of course.
easily, yeah, for seniors and
Yeah.
stuff. And actually, uh, parking lots designed for people who have needs. Um, you know, uh, those lots are bigger. If you got wheelchair accessible lot or whatever, so they're bigger. They take up more space. Yeah, so it was just dumb to move it from McBain Center, which was a very lively market and it was very successful, where everybody liked it, whether you were a vendor or a customer. And the only plus that the exchange has is that it had certain areas that were enclosed, so kind of protected from the weather, but most of
Yeah.
it was still outside. And
Yeah.
what we want to do is have a vibrant farmers market, and McBain Center is perfect because it has huge parking lots, big spaces, uh, and for the vendors and for the customers. So anyway, yeah.
I think there's
But
generally, I would
pointing out
say that,
here is what she's really pointing out here is, now what are you going to do about stuff that isn't part of that farmers market? How do you accommodate people in an awkward parking situation?
yeah. And in fact, that was always the problem. I remember when they were building, before they even built the exchange, let's be honest, parking was a challenge even before the exchange was built.
Yeah,
Right?
and that kept being pointed out over and over again, but it
Yeah.
never seemed to get a good answer, did it?
Nobody, that has been a challenge in for the parking to go to the Niagara Falls Museum, that whole area to visit the what do you call it, some of the shops and other places like the government offices that are on at Peel and Main. That has always been a consistent problem. Right, that area has been problematic with parking, and the other lot helps, but and And in fact, actually, what I've done is I've parked in the warehouse club car park and walked across.
Well, that is the problem, because people are abusers
Yeah.
of the system like you are irritating the people around there. So the streets are plugged. The streets are plugged. Businesses like Newest Eggs has people parking there. So basically, they didn't really plan. If they have any major event there, how are they going to accommodate the parking? They're
Yeah.
talking even, she's talking about even having a set aside parking lot with shuttle buses coming to the exchange. That seems very, very awkward. I think probably, as I pointed out before, there's that parking lot 13 uh, there. And if they could expand that, or even lease the parking that is at the No Frill, or with that big old shopping center that's there right near Main and Ferry. They got a very, very big parking lot there. So anyone with a little bit of could walk there. Anyone younger than, that is still healthy can walk there, and that all the other places should be permitted for seniors or
Well, the parking in the hub itself, if they had more disabled slots, would probably be that would be well accepted.
Yeah, I would think the ones in and around, most of the ones in and around the exchange itself should be made for the disabled people, because, like I said, lot 13, which is not that far away, I can't understand why everybody thinks that's, there it is. There's lot 13, parking lot right there. And like I said, you could lease part of or make, there's that huge parking lot. What is it? I don't know what it is. It's an old grocery store, basically, right there. You know that one I mean, as you pass by the hospital going south. So there's a huge parking lot there, and it's not that far. So when they talk about having people go to a special place and then have them shuttled in, the vast majority of people that would go to events could easily walk that far. That's not that far.
Yeah.
So there is places you can park in and around there that you don't have to go to a shuttle service, which I think is a bit extreme. I would say, like I said before,
think a shuttle service is I think a shuttle service is extreme. I just think that we need to actually have some properly planned parking in that area. And there might well already be enough, and maybe what we need is signage and proper usage of it.
Well, like I said before, parking lot 13 is like a 5 or 10 minute walk to the market.
Yeah.
So that's why I think
how many people know it's there?
Well, yeah, because it's behind the old liquor store, and you don't see too many people parked there. Every once in a while, you look, and there's an old car back there. But yeah, she didn't mention that once, unless for some reason they've decided they're not going to use that parking lot anymore. But that's about 10-minute walk, and like I said, right beside it is the big parking lot for that what used to be a grocery store there, and so there are options that are right there right now that you could use, and that's why I think the ones in and around the exchange should be reserved for disabled people.
Yeah. And I kind of support that view. I think that's a well worthwhile view, because the other walks would mean coming up a hill, of course.
And look, if you go to the McBain Center, and sometimes it's very full, and you have to park quite a ways, and you have to walk to where the vendors are a fair amount, it is equal to walking from parking lot 13 or that
Yeah, but again, if you park in if you park in the Rona car park or the one with the Niagara Health building there, you're probably
Why would you
only.
park there?
Pardon me?
Why would you park there?
It's right across the road from
Yeah, I
McBain.
know, but the parking lot's big enough that you don't have to do that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm saying,
Anyway, I'm just
if you
saying
were
if
to
they
park at
expand it,
yeah, okay.
if you had parking crush there, at least you've got other parking within range. You could go park in the community health place across the road. That's all I was
Yeah, I
saying.
don't. I think that would be very rare to be able to do that, but to have to park at one of the extremities of the parking lot at McBain Center would give you a good walk, would be equal to
Yeah.
the ones that I'm describing. Now, Karen Fraser
Karen,
says a 5 to 10 minute walk is impossible if you're carrying foods. Yes, that's right. That's why you have to have a collapsible wagon.
yeah. Okay. All right. One more thing. There's $180 million upgrade planned for the Welland Canal. And St. Lawrence Seaway is announcing these upgrades. And this is an upgrade program that is taking place, presumably most winters between now and 2027. Now, in saying this, $180 million upgrade doesn't sound like an absolutely massive upgrade.
$180 million is substantial. Is substantial for the Welland
It's
Canal.
substantial, but it's not It's not massive.
Well, for this area, it's a pretty big project. $180 million. I remember working on the canals, and they thought it was a big budget when they threw $50 million in it. I worked on the canal upgrades for 7 years, 7 different years, usually on the gates and the lift bridges. So
that's a lot of what they're looking to be doing, because they're saying about maintaining and upgrading locks and bridges, and that's a lot of, typically every winter there's changes and maintenance to locks and bridges.
Yes, and this is old technology, and I'm telling you, it's really fantastic the way they did it. However, you're working with water, and of course that's a problem with steel and water when you get together, and you're working with very old technologies here. Now, these things are going to be had to be upgraded every once in a while anyway, because of the forces that they're required to do. The water has to come from one place and go to another. The bridges have to go up and down. The gates have to be swung back and forth, and they're doing that all on the basis of a very old technology. This stuff was finished in 1929, but it was designed a good 10 years before that. I've seen all the blueprints, so I know. Mm-hmm. So this is,
but again,
the engineering was fantastic for the day, but it requires, because it's a very old system, it requires periodic updates, and they expect this to happen.
Yeah.
So when they're putting $188 million into it, I think it's pretty much just bringing it up, just fixing all the quirks and clinks in it and replacing what they have to replace.
Yeah. One of the things, though, this isn't, just to be clear, there has been talk recently about putting larger ships through the Great Lakes system. I think they're 1,000-footers at the moment. They're looking at making 1,500-foot ships available through the Great Lakes system.
No, you'll never get the Lakers are about 720 feet long. The canal can take them, but they cannot take anything larger. So a Laker is a certain size, and some of those Lakers can go to sea, by the way. They're not just Lakers, but Lakers are designed for the canal system, and they're about 700. I think the top length is about 725 feet long. The 1,000-footers that you're talking about ply the trades between the westernmost part of Lake Superior up to, but not including, anything past the Welland Canal. So they were very good for us when we worked at Nanacoke because you can get 1,000-footer full of coal, and but because that 1,000-footer need not have gone uh, through the canal. So right now the canal cannot take
But
anything
they
even
were
close.
talking about upgrades to the canal to allow
That would
these
be a
to go through.
massive, massive project.
Yeah,
That would be a massive, massive project if you wanted to make the canal capable of taking 1,000-footers and a 50 and 100-footer. I don't anything.
I
You
think
will not
actually it
see
was a
anything like that.
1,000 foot, not 1,500. Actually, now I think about it, I was mistaken in what I said. I thought the canals could take larger than they do. Yeah, so 700 foot is what they take right now. 1,000 foot significantly different. With all of the locks, they would basically have to lengthen all those locks, particularly up the step that the Thorold lock.
Yeah. So in order to upgrade the Welland Canal to take 1,000-footers or better, that would be an extremely large project. It
Yeah.
would take, if it would pay off quickly, I think government money would be thrown into that. But the case for it is not there right now
Yeah.
because most of the capacity can be run through 720. Well, the typical Laker.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're designed very well and can maximize cargo quite well. And like I say, many of the Lakers can go right out to sea as well. But what will happen sometimes, Lakers will uh, discharge their cargo, and then that cargo would be repacked into huge transatlantic or transpacific or oceanic vessels. So I don't know. We see ships coming from all over the world going through the canal system, and they're made to go through canal systems similar to the canal system that we have. And that is true for the Panama Canal too.
Yeah.
Remember, the Mexicans are restarting their old program they had many, many years ago, where they're having a huge port on the Caribbean side of Mexico, and then they have huge ports on the Mexican side, the Pacific side, and in between they transport through train the cargo from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and this is the way they can accommodate huge cargo ships
Volumes of
because the
cargo
Panama
moving. Yeah.
Canal, yeah, because the Panama Canal cannot handle them, and there's actually it used to be the thing that sped things up, but right now it's a bit of a choke point because even if that's being done anyway,
Well,
and
the whole point is that we've gotten larger and larger and larger vessels. And remember the one that got stuck in the Suez Canal. Basically, the Suez Canal isn't made for such large vessels, but yet because it was it's a relatively, all they've done is dug a canal through a long stretch of land that wouldn't otherwise have water in it. Of course, that's what caused this vessel to get stuck.
well, that was the Everton, wasn't it? The Everton, something like that.
That
And
was,
yeah,
yeah, but it was way bigger than the Suez Canal was ever perceived for.
yeah, but it can go through the Suez Canal without much problem, but the pilot or the captain or somebody made
Yeah,
a mistake and it went sideways and got jammed.
yeah,
So
oh
that
yeah.
was human error basically. But that ship can do the Suez, which is kind of comforting in a way because we do need that. And what is it? 12% of all trade goes through the Suez Canal.
I thought it was higher. I thought it was about 25% of all world trade goes through the Suez Canal.
I think most of the trade of the world goes through the Malacca Straits in Indonesia.
Yeah,
Around there, I think that's the busiest corridor for ships because of course they're the ones taken from China
yeah.
and then move through there into Europe through the Panama Canal, or pardon me, the Suez Canal.
Suez Canal, yeah.
Yeah.
Something like 20% of all world trade goes through Suez, as I understand it.
Well, one of the reasons why that battery separator is coming to Port Colborne is because of the canal.
Yeah.
So that the transportation link that is the Great Lakes Seaways basically is very, very important when we can see it. So as you put, if they do find that they're going to need larger ships and it would make things much better, then you would get the initiative of all the different governments helping and planning and adding money to expand the Welland Canal to be much more capable of taking larger ships. But I think they probably, if anything, it would be nice to see if they could twin the canal, but they'd have to have a real strong business case for it.
Probably, yeah. It's an interesting thought. That's an interesting thought because, thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought about that and what we would do about twinning the canal. In a way, that's a novel idea, except for how you would. There is so much along the edge of the canal nowadays that how would you get to twin the canal? The idea being, of course, that you've got one canal that goes north to south and the other canal that goes south to north, right?
Yeah, there's many ideas. Maybe they can find ways of just picking up the ship and transporting it right across. But I think if they do need more capacity, what they'll do is they'll do what the Mexicans are doing now and put a port in Lake Erie and then a port in, storage area in Fort Erie and one, or in Lake Erie and one in Lake Ontario, where they take the cargo ships and
an
put
offload
them.
Point. Yeah, you're talking about as an offload point in Port Weller and an onload point in Port Colborne, and vice versa.
Just like as I described,
with a rapid rail transit between them. The only trouble
don't want it too fast. They got a lot of cargo.
Well, when I say rapid, remember it takes 24 hours for a ship to go through the canal. To offload, rapid means less than 24 hours to offload and offload, move and unload that same cargo.
Yeah, that seems to be right now. They don't, that step in itself could be easier and easier every day because of the container system that we have. Because containers are relatively easy taken off and put back on.
Yeah, but it isn't going to help the grain ships or the coal ships.
No, they're going to, those grain ships are going to have to stay Laker size if they want to get out of the Welland Canal and move on. But if they discharge their load in Port Colborne, which many of them do, they have the flour mills there and all. So.
Yeah. All right. I think we can kind of call it quits at that point. Shows a lot better with the sound on. Cheers. Yeah. I don't know what happened with the sound. It wasn't on our side. And just so that everybody knows, I tested all 3 channels that we go to. One of them failed, which was the Talking Niagara channel on Facebook. I have no clue as to why it failed. It failed and then it worked again later on. So I have no clue. All right.
Well, when I was talking to Karen Fraser yesterday and she pointed that out, I blamed you, of course, right? I don't know what Peter did. I don't know. Yeah.
Nothing to do with me.
I don't know what he did, Karen.
Entirely outside of my control. I can control how you and I communicate, how you and I can continue to speak, but the outside, whether there's noise going into from here to the internet, I can control. Going out from beyond the internet, I can't control.
There you have it. So
there we have it. Yeah.
Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Peace, everybody. Peace. Pray for peace.